Velthra 5 was unlike any world the Galactic Academy had ever chosen for survival trials. Its orbit was tilted so far that daylight never broke the horizon completely. Instead, the sky remained a dim ocean of twilight hues, violet and blue bleeding together in endless dusk. The jungle below glowed faintly with bioluminescent vines that pulsed like veins, and every tree exhaled steam into the heavy air. From above, it looked beautiful, a world wrapped in shimmering fog and mystery. But the cadets soon learned that beauty here was nothing but camouflage for terror. The first 24 hours went smoothly enough. The mixed species group, 12 cadets from 7 races, landed on an open ridge where the jungle parted, offering just enough flat ground to set up shelters. The instructor's message was simple: survive 30 nights without external aid. Food, tools, and rations were rationed to last half that time, forcing them to learn cooperation. The aliens began as optimists. The Varakians, tall insectoid beings with sharp mandibles, immediately took command, claiming superiority in organization. The amphibian Yulnites built moisture tents to store water, while the feathered Arceans perched above to scout the surroundings. It looked like teamwork, until the first night fell. At dusk, a deep vibration began beneath the soil. It wasn't an earthquake, but a hum, a frequency so low it rattled the bones. The air shifted, and the bioluminescent vines dimmed, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. Then came the scream. It didn't sound like any animal. No throat, no lungs could produce that layered cry. It was more like metal being shredded underwater. It echoed through the canopy, bounced off the ridges, and returned with doubled force. One of the younger cadets, an Arzian female with silver feathers, froze mid-flight and dropped into the mud, her wings trembling violently. The sound didn't just reach ears. It crawled inside skulls, prying at instinctive terror. Liam Cole, the only human in the group, sat by the half-assembled shelter when the first scream erupted. He had spent most of the day quietly observing, letting the others argue over leadership and task distribution. He was used to the arrogance of alien cadets. The same pattern played out in every academy exercise. They underestimated humans until circumstances stripped away structure and comfort. When the scream rolled through the jungle, the others scattered. One Varakian leader, Lieutenant Krex, shouted something about perimeter defense, but his mandibles clattered in panic. 2 amphibians tripped over their water packs, spilling half their reserve. Liam didn't move. He stared into the forest where the darkness pulsed between trees like a living thing. His breathing remained steady, though the back of his neck prickled. Something primal inside him recognized that sound. It wasn't just a predator's cry. It was a test. The second scream came closer, branches cracked, followed by heavy, synchronized footsteps circling the camp. The bioluminescent glow returned faintly, enough for the cadets to glimpse silhouettes, massive shapes with too many legs and jaws that reflected light. Nocturnes. That was the name the Academy had used in briefing simulations. Blind apex predators that hunted by echolocation and chemical trace, rumored to live only in Velthra 5's deepest jungles. According to theory, they should have stayed miles away from the ridge, but theory rarely survived contact with reality. The camp fell into chaos. The aliens tried to use plasma lamps as deterrents, but the bright light only enraged the creatures. One slammed against a crate of supplies, crushing it instantly. The noise alone was enough to paralyze the reptilian cadets. The human instinct for movement kicked in, and Liam dragged one of them away before a second blow landed. When the group finally managed to trigger a flare, the beasts retreated into the mist, their movement silent as breath. The flare burned for 90 seconds. When it died, silence reclaimed the jungle. No one slept that night. The cadets sat close together, backs to one another, weapons drawn though none of them had ammunition. Their instructor drones had confiscated ranged weapons before the trial began, forcing them to rely on hand tools. The Varakian commander paced in circles, whispering about reinforcement requests that would never come. Liam sat slightly apart, arms crossed, head tilted as he listened to the faint rustle of leaves beyond the perimeter. He noticed the rhythm in the noise. 3 slow steps, pause, another 3. There was method in it. Predators that intelligent didn't hunt blindly. They were measuring distance, gauging reaction. It reminded him of something he had read once about wolves circling prey, just to taste fear before the actual strike. By morning, 3 tents were gone, torn open and dragged toward the trees. No bodies were found, only shredded fabric and claw marks carved deep into the soil. The aliens began to accuse one another of sabotage, insisting that no natural creature could have targeted the shelters so precisely. Liam didn't argue. He walked to the edge of the clearing, squatted near a print in the mud, and pressed his fingers against it. It was wider than his forearm, the edges smooth as if the creature's foot had exuded heat. The soil wasn't compressed. It was melted. That meant weight combined with intense body temperature, enough to soften ground. He made a note in his mind. Sound, heat, rhythm. 3 clues. He didn't know yet how to use them, but he knew observation was his greatest weapon. Throughout the day, the cadets rebuilt their defenses in silence. No one laughed or argued now. Every movement was mechanical, born of fear rather than strategy. The Varakian commander issued strict orders that all noise was to be minimized. No talking, no metal tools, no light during nightfall. The group obeyed, desperate for control. Liam followed the order outwardly, but disagreed inwardly. Silence was exactly what the beasts wanted. It gave them the advantage of hearing everything that breathed. He had learned in survival training that predators who hunted by sound could be confused, not by quiet, but by overlapping rhythms. Chaos of noise could cloak presence. That night, when the others curled up in terror, Liam did something unthinkable. He lay back on his mat and closed his eyes. The Arjans watched him, horrified. One of them whispered that the human must have gone insane, that the pressure of fear had cracked his mind. But he wasn't sleeping from ignorance. He was testing his limits, studying how his body reacted to the sound. When the screams came again, he forced himself to remain still. His heart pounded against his ribs, but his breathing remained measured. He wanted to hear beyond the fear, to separate the echo from the origin. And gradually, he noticed something strange. The creatures always circled clockwise, always paused at the same intervals, and always avoided the rock formation near the east ridge. There, the stone's surface created sharp echoes that distorted their calls. Liam opened his eyes, realization dawning. They didn't attack from that direction because the sound betrayed their distance. The stone confused them. That was why the camp had survived the first night. Their landing site was partially shielded by echo-reflective surfaces. It wasn't luck. It was acoustics. When dawn broke again, the sky was still dim, but the air felt heavier, charged with tension. The Varakian commander demanded new orders, blaming the human for disrespectful behavior during crisis hours. Liam said nothing at first, then finally spoke in a calm tone that made the others uneasy. "If you want to live," he said, "stop pretending silence will save you. Start listening instead." The aliens didn't understand, but his words lingered long after. That morning, while the others counted rations and repaired gear, Liam began collecting scraps, empty ration cans, metal utensils, fragments of ship plating. He examined each piece for resonance, tapping it lightly to hear its tone. Then, without explaining, he walked toward the eastern ridge where the rock walls reflected sound. The others watched, whispering that he had finally lost his mind. But Liam simply smiled faintly, the first real smile since arrival. He had heard the jungle's pattern. He had begun to understand its music. That night, as the light faded again, the jungle waited for fear to return. The cadets sat huddled, eyes darting toward the tree line, hands shaking. The first low hum rose beneath the soil, signaling the arrival of the nocturnes. But before the scream tore through the air, another sound joined it, a soft metallic clink, rhythmic and alien to this world. The vines around the camp trembled. The beasts hesitated. For the first time since landing, the screams faltered. Somewhere in the dark, Liam smiled again, unseen by the others. The planet might scream, but he had decided to listen, and listening was the first step to mastering it. By the third night, the others were unraveling. Nocturnes had not yet crossed the ridge again, but the mere anticipation of their screams was enough to strip the cadets of rest. Some sat with weapons clutched in trembling hands, jerking at every rustle, while others muttered prayers in languages the translators could barely process. Hunger made tempers short, fear made reason vanish. The Arceans, usually graceful and calm, began tearing at their feathers. The Varakians sharpened their mandibles against stones as if preparing to attack each other, but Liam Cole still slept. He rolled out his blanket, stretched out beneath the half-repaired canopy, and closed his eyes as if he were in a safe dormitory back at the academy. The sound of the jungle filled the night, distant drips of condensation, soft clicks of insects, the occasional groan of trees bending under humidity. He listened to it all and drifted into uneasy but deliberate sleep. At first, his choice enraged the others. Commander Krex confronted him, his metallic voice rasping with disbelief. "How can you sleep when death walks outside?" he hissed. Liam didn't answer. He turned over, arm under his head, eyes still closed. To him, fear was noise, a constant distraction. If he let it dictate his actions, he would lose clarity. He needed clarity now more than ever. He wanted to learn how the Nocturnes moved, what triggered them, and whether sound alone could hold power over such beasts. Sleeping, oddly enough, helped him think. When he closed his eyes, his mind replayed the sounds from the night before, the interval between screams, the pause before movement, the faint metallic resonance that had startled the creatures near the ridge. The rhythm had meaning, and he wanted to understand it the way a hunter reads wind. The next morning, while others complained about the lack of food and demanded early extraction, Liam walked quietly through the damp grass to the perimeter where he had heard the hesitation of the Nocturnes. He crouched and examined the ground. The tracks were clear now, large, evenly spaced, and always curving, never straight. He pressed his ear to the earth. Faint tremors still pulsed beneath the surface, like a heartbeat echoing from deep below. He realized the creatures did not just walk on the ground, they listened to it too. Each step sent vibrations that guided their movement, a kind of subterranean sonar. The realization struck him with cold precision. Silence wasn't safety. Silence was blindness. The creatures could sense stillness as easily as noise. Only controlled, layered sound, chaos-turned rhythm could mask a living presence. He needed a way to test that theory. The camp, however, was on the edge of collapse. Commander Krex had split the cadets into two groups, one guarding the camp and another fetching water from a stream that shimmered in the distance. But the guards refused to go alone. Even in daylight, the jungle's haze made it impossible to see 10 meters ahead. The air shimmered with spores that clung to skin like ash, leaving a sour metallic scent. When the Arjans returned with full canisters, their feathers were slicked with the residue, and one collapsed before reaching camp, gasping for air. Liam watched from the shadows, calculating. The water wasn't the real threat. The panic was. Every sound the cadets made was erratic, unpatterned, and loud. He could almost imagine the Nocturnes lurking at the forest's edge, listening, waiting for chaos to mark its prey. That night, he began his experiment. While others huddled near the dim glow of biolamps, he scavenged through the supply crates and pulled out empty ration tins, metal plates, and fragments of fuel casings. Each piece of metal had its own tone when struck. He arranged them on the ground like instruments, testing how long each resonance lasted. A small group of cadets watched him with suspicion, whispering about the human who had gone feral. Liam ignored them. He tied the first set of tins to thin vines and strung them along the inner edge of the camp, letting the wind move them slightly. The soft clinks echoed faintly across the clearing. It wasn't music, more like nervous murmuring. The noise unsettled the others. The Varakians demanded silence again, threatening to dismantle his work, but Liam's calm stare made them hesitate. "You're already dying from fear," he said quietly. "At least let something else speak tonight." When darkness settled, the wind began to stir. The vines swayed, and the metallic pieces chimed irregularly, creating a fragile, shimmering rhythm that danced through the jungle's breath. Hours passed. The cadets whispered prayers. The Arceans twitched in their perches. Then came the familiar vibration underfoot. The soil quivered, leaves shivered, and the first guttural hum of the Nocturnes rolled through the mist. The camp froze. The hum grew louder, then fractured into separate echoes as the beasts moved in a semicircle around the ridge. But something was different. Instead of charging, the steps slowed. The creature's motion faltered as the metallic chimes rang through the clearing. The overlapping sounds disrupted their pattern. The Nocturnes clicked, trying to recalibrate. The rhythm of their footfalls broke, tangled in confusion. One of the Arjans gasped when a massive shadow appeared between the trees. It leaned forward, skeletal and broad, its skin reflecting faint violet light. Two glowing orbs blinked where eyes might have been, though everyone knew the creatures saw with sound, not sight. The air trembled as it released a low hiss, part growl, part vibration. The chimes answered, clinking softly. The creature stopped. It tilted its head. The resonance of metal had stolen its certainty. The other beasts behind it hesitated as well, circling but not advancing. Liam crouched near his shelter, watched every movement. His pulse remained steady. He counted the seconds. 8, 9, 10, then exhaled slowly as the first shadow retreated. The others followed, their steps fading into the forest's endless hum. For the first time, the night ended without blood. When dawn arrived, the camp was eerily quiet, but a different kind of silence. A silence of awe rather than dread. The cadets stepped outside their shelters, blinking against the dim light. The Varakian commander examined the perimeter where the creatures had stopped. The ground was littered with broken leaves and massive footprints, each halted mid-approach. Liam stood a few meters away, hands behind his back, eyes focused on the tinkling remnants of his creation. "You see," he said softly, "sound can build walls stronger than stone." The commander glared at him, unsure whether to be grateful or angry. Pride warred with survival instinct. He didn't thank the human, but he also didn't order the devices removed. Over the next day, Liam refined his method. He replaced some tins with hollow tubes to alter pitch and added small pebbles inside to create resonance shifts. He mapped the perimeter, marking where the wind flowed most consistently, ensuring the sound remained unpredictable but constant. He also began sketching on the inner walls of his shelter, rough diagrams showing waveforms, resonance patterns, and intervals. When one curious cadet asked what he was doing, Liam replied, "I'm teaching the air to lie." The alien didn't understand, but the human's tone left no room for doubt. That evening, he noticed a change among the group. The Arjans stopped trembling as much, their feathers less ruffled. The amphibians ventured a few meters beyond the camp to collect mushrooms for food. Even the Varakians, who had previously accused him of recklessness, watched his work with thinly veiled interest. Hope, fragile but real, began to replace panic. But Liam wasn't finished. He understood that survival wasn't about scaring the beasts away, it was about controlling the balance of fear. If he could make the camp sound alive but untouchable, the Nocturnes would learn to avoid it. That was the goal, to teach the predators boundaries through rhythm rather than violence. When the fourth night came, the wind died completely. The vines hung still. The chimes were silent. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. Liam's muscles tensed as he realized what this meant. The beasts would sense the sudden void of noise as weakness. He grabbed a broken pipe and struck it with a rock. Once, twice, thrice, in a measured rhythm. The sound rolled outward, hollow and deep. The air shifted. Another cadet, seeing him, followed suit, tapping 2 tins together softly. Then another joined in. Soon the camp was alive with faint metallic echoes, uneven but persistent. The vibrations rippled through the mist, filling the silence before the Nocturnes could. The ground trembled again, but this time the cadence of movement was slower. The creatures circled at a greater distance, never closing in. Liam felt the vibration recede and knew they had accepted the illusion. He leaned against a rock, exhausted but satisfied. Around him, the cadets exhaled, realizing they had survived yet another night. Some approached him afterward, hesitant but curious. The Arcean, who had fainted on the first night, offered him a handful of dry fruit, a quiet gesture of gratitude. Liam accepted it with a nod. As he chewed, he glanced toward the forest. The Nocturnes were still there, listening, perhaps confused, or learning as he was. The planet remained alive with sound, his sound. In the fragile balance between predator and prey, he had found a rhythm, and for now, it was holding. He closed his eyes again, not to rest, but to listen, and smiled faintly. For the first time, he wasn't just surviving Velthra 5, he was beginning to understand it. The morning after the fourth night was humid and silent, except for the low hum of insects that always seemed to hide somewhere beneath the fog. The sun never truly rose on Velthra 5, but the mist thinned enough for Liam Cole to see what his work had done. The ground around the camp was etched with footprints, massive circular imprints that stopped precisely at the ring of hanging tins. Not a single print crossed the perimeter. It looked as if some invisible wall had been drawn in the dirt. The cadets, once skeptical and hostile, now followed him with their eyes as he moved around the clearing. None of them spoke when he collected the scattered pieces of metal and replaced them with smoother fragments that sang cleaner when struck by wind. The sound filled the air, soft and uneven but alive, like breath exhaled by the jungle itself. Liam's hands were blackened with soot and sap. He had been working since dawn, weaving new lines of vines through branches to suspend more pieces higher above ground. The jungle trees were strong and damp, their bark almost rubbery. He climbed them with deliberate care, balancing on slick branches, looping ropes between trunks to form what would soon become the first proper sound fence. He didn't just want scattered noise anymore. He wanted resonance, an orchestrated wall of sound that pulsed like a living heartbeat. Commander Krex watched him from below, arms crossed, mandibles twitching in quiet frustration. The Varakian's pride had taken a blow, but survival overrode hierarchy now. He finally broke the silence. "Human," he said, his voice clicking with metallic disapproval. "How long before this contraption collapses under its own chaos?" Liam glanced down at him, squinting through the mist. "As long as the wind keeps breathing," he answered simply. Krex didn't reply, but he didn't stop him either. By midday, the camp had transformed. The vines stretched outward like veins, lined with hundreds of small, resonant pieces, metal scraps, glass shards, hollow bones from creatures the group had scavenged earlier. Each material made a different tone. The jungle breeze that once carried only dread now played through the hanging fragments like fingers on strings. The sound wasn't beautiful in the traditional sense. It was discordant and haunting, a layered composition that shifted with every gust. Yet there was something magnetic about it, something that made the cadets pause and listen instead of panic. As the wind grew stronger, Liam crouched to test how the vibrations traveled through the soil. He pressed his palm into the mud. The ground trembled faintly, but this time not from the approach of predators. The vibrations came from the fence itself. The sound wasn't just filling the air, it was seeping into the earth. He smiled faintly, realizing that his wall was doing more than masking noise. It was talking to the planet, creating interference that confused the sonar-like senses of the nocturnes. If the beasts hunted by sound, then he would drown their senses in music. The cadets began to join his efforts. The Artians used their keen eyesight to align the upper vines for better resonance, while the amphibians coated metal pieces with a thin layer of sap to make them hum longer. For the first time since arrival, cooperation returned to the group. The humans' calm determination had become contagious. One Arzian female, slender and graceful, asked him how he knew such things. He smiled faintly and replied, "You learn to listen to what frightens you. It tells you where the truth hides." She didn't understand his words entirely, but she understood his tone, the quiet conviction of a man who had seen fear and turned it into discipline. By evening, the transformation was complete. The ridge that had once been a vulnerable camp now looked like a cathedral of noise. When the wind passed through, the air shimmered with sound. The cadets gathered near the center, their faces lit by faint bioluminescent plants that glowed underfoot. The Arjans whispered that the fence sounded like 1,000 ghosts singing. The amphibians described it as a heartbeat outside the body. But to Liam, it was a boundary, a signal to the beasts that this place was claimed by something that understood their language of vibration. As night descended, tension returned. The jungle dimmed, and that familiar subterranean hum rose once more. The cadets tensed, but Liam didn't reach for a weapon. He stood still, eyes fixed on the tree line. The first scream erupted, deep and guttural, rolling through the mist like thunder. The fence sang back, an eerie cascade of metallic chimes that clashed and echoed in perfect discord. The sound didn't repel the nocturnes immediately. It agitated them. The ground quivered under their heavy steps. Two massive shadows emerged between the trees, circling, their movements cautious, yet deliberate. The cadets drew closer together. The Arjans whispered nervous prayers. But Liam's gaze stayed steady. He knew this confrontation would decide whether the creatures feared the sound or challenged it. The first nocturne lunged forward. Its form was monstrous, 8 legs, slick and dark, with a body that pulsed faintly with heat. It reached the outer line of the fence and froze. The overlapping tones vibrated against its hide, echoing back to its sonar organs with unbearable distortion. The creature let out a confused shriek, thrashing its head. The resonance waves bent the sound it produced, reflecting it back at different frequencies. Liam stepped closer to the edge, observing. He could see the beast recoil each time the wind intensified. It was as if the sound wall had turned into an invisible maze. The creature's instincts, usually precise, now betrayed it. After several moments of restless circling, it retreated, vanishing into the mist. The second creature was larger, slower, and more cautious. It didn't attack immediately. It approached the barrier and stopped, tilting its massive skull as if listening. Liam's heart pounded. This one was learning. It emitted a low-frequency pulse, a test. The fence responded with an avalanche of tones. The predator flinched, stepped back, and tried again. The sound waves collided in the air, producing an eerie harmony. For a moment, it looked as though the creature might push through. But then something unexpected happened. The wind shifted sharply from the north, blowing through the highest strands of metal and bone. The new pitch hit the beast directly, vibrating against the sensitive membranes in its chest cavity. It howled in agony and fled into the darkness, leaving a trail of disturbed fog behind. The camp fell still. The fence continued to hum softly, fading into a low lullaby of metal and wind. None of the cadets spoke for several minutes. The air felt charged with disbelief. Commander Krex finally exhaled a rasping hiss and looked at Liam. "You did it," he said, his tone equal parts awe and irritation. "You made the jungle itself your soldier." Liam shook his head slowly. "Not a soldier," he replied. "Just a language the beasts understand." The following day, he began improving the system. He taught the cadets how to adjust the frequency by changing the height and spacing of the vines. He discovered that by layering bones and metal in alternating rows, the resonance lasted longer after each gust. He also burned sap from the large red-barked trees around the camp to produce a smell the creatures seemed to despise. The scent combined with the fence created a dual barrier, sound and chemical. The cadets soon began referring to the perimeter as the singing wall. In the evenings, when the air cooled, Liam sat near the outer ring, sketching diagrams in the dirt. He mapped wind directions, recorded tone sequences, and measured how long the vibrations lingered after impact. The Arzian female often joined him, watching quietly. One night she asked, "Are you trying to defeat them or to speak with them?" He paused before answering. "Both," he said. "To defeat something, you have to first let it speak to you." The camp gradually changed in spirit. The fear that had once controlled every heartbeat now turned into focus. The cadets began sleeping in shifts confident enough to close their eyes for a few hours. The once fractured alliance between species solidified under a single purpose, maintaining the harmony of sound. The fence needed constant care. Vines had to be retied, pieces cleaned, sap replaced. But every time the wind passed through, the entire ridge sang again, and the haunting melody became a reminder that they were no longer helpless prey. On the 8th night, the beasts returned again, but this time, the encounter was different. The nocturnes came close, paced along the border, and emitted low vibrations that sounded almost like curiosity. The fence answered with rippling tones, and instead of attacking, the creatures mirrored the rhythm. For several minutes, the jungle echoed with strange music, predator and prey communicating through vibration alone. Liam stood by the fence, his expression unreadable. He didn't raise a weapon, he didn't move. He simply listened. The cadets watched in silence as the exchange continued until the beasts eventually retreated once more, leaving the ridge untouched. That night, as the chimes swayed softly in the wind, Liam realized something profound. The fence wasn't merely a defense. It was a dialogue, a bridge between minds that had never needed words. The cadets had learned fear through silence, but now they were learning respect through sound. He sat beneath the largest tree, hands resting on his knees, eyes half closed, listening to the rhythm that filled the air. The fence sang of survival, of coexistence, of a strange and fragile peace born not from conquest, but from understanding. And as he drifted into sleep, he knew the jungle was listening back. The 9th day on Velthra 5 began with silence, the kind that pressed against the ears until breathing sounded too loud. The fences were still singing softly, but the melody had changed. Some of the vines had snapped overnight, and the rhythm was uneven now, uncertain, like a heartbeat after exhaustion. Liam Cole rose before the others and examined the damage. The sap that coated the lines had dried out, and the wind had shifted, blowing from a direction that didn't favor resonance. The air carried a metallic taste, and in the distance, faint vibrations trembled through the soil. The nocturnes were still out there, watching, waiting. He climbed one of the ridge trees to get a better view of the horizon. The jungle stretched endlessly, glowing faintly under its own bioluminescent haze. For days, he had felt as though the beasts were responding differently to the fence. as if they had begun to learn the pattern of the sounds. Every living creature adapted, and he suspected the nocturnes were no different. As he scanned the mist below, he noticed large trails cutting through the underbrush, too clean to be random. The creatures were moving closer again, testing the perimeter from different angles. The thought made his pulse quicken, not from fear, but from anticipation. He had known it would come to this. The predators were intelligent enough to probe the weakness in his rhythm, and soon they would find it. He needed to adapt faster than they could. When he descended, Commander Krex approached him, holding a data scroll that had been dropped by a reconnaissance drone during the night. The message was brief, written in the terse code of the Academy. Trial extension, collect biological specimen, nocturne, alive. The commander's mandibles clicked in disbelief. Alive? He hissed. We can barely keep ourselves alive, and the instructors want us to bring them a monster as a pet. Liam read the message and said nothing for a long time. He could hear the cadets whispering nearby, their fear returning like a fog creeping back over a valley. The demand for a live capture was absurd, yet it revealed something about the instructors. They wanted proof of coexistence, not domination. Perhaps that was the real lesson of the trial. "I'll do it," Liam said finally. His voice was steady, low, but absolute. The commander stared at him, his antennae twitching. "You alone?" Liam nodded. "I don't need a squad to scare it off. I need quiet hands." Krex didn't argue. He only looked away, unwilling to admit that part of him was relieved someone else would take the risk. That evening, as the others reinforced the sound fences, Liam began gathering materials: broken ropes, spare vines, empty ration straps, and the bones from a carcass the amphibians had found days earlier. He examined every piece, testing strength and flexibility. The air grew thicker, carrying the weight of an approaching storm. He worked methodically, sketching diagrams into the dirt, circles, counterweights, trigger lines. The idea was not to trap through brute force, but through confusion. The nocturnes were creatures of rhythm. He would use that rhythm against them. The cadets watched in silence as he constructed the mechanism. He dug shallow pits into the mud and buried stones beneath them, connecting the stones to ropes threaded through the branches above. When triggered, the ropes would tighten instantly, creating a loop that lifted slightly but didn't crush. It was a snare designed to immobilize through balance disruption, not pain. To most, it looked fragile, too simple to contain a beast that could crush metal crates. But Liam understood that survival wasn't about overpowering nature, it was about redirecting its momentum. When the trap was ready, he chose the location carefully, near the broken section of the fence where the sound faltered and the beasts were most likely to test the weakness. He coated the vines with the same burning sap that produced the repellent scent, masking his own trace. Then, as the light dimmed into violet twilight, he waited. The cadets watched from the ridge, whispering nervously. The Arzian female wanted to help, but he refused. "One heartbeat makes one rhythm," he told her. "Two would break it." She didn't argue. As darkness fell, the familiar tremors began. The ground pulsed faintly beneath his boots. He crouched, motionless, his breathing shallow. The fence sang in uneven tones behind him, and the forest responded with an echo, a call that wasn't quite natural. The first nocturne appeared between the trees, its body vast and sinewy, glistening with damp heat. Its movements were deliberate, cautious. It sniffed the air, sensing the sap, but curiosity drove it closer. Its heavy limbs pressed into the soil, sending deep vibrations through the ground. Liam could feel every step in his bones. When the creature crossed the broken section of the sound barrier, it stopped, confused by the sudden silence. The jungle's faint hum distorted there, swallowed by the void. It let out a low-frequency growl that shook the leaves from branches. Liam didn't move. The beast stepped forward again, slower this time. As it passed over the thin loop of vine hidden beneath the mud, the counterweight triggered with a soft snap. The ropes tightened. The creature roared, but not in pain, just in shock. Its front limbs stumbled, the tension pulling its balance forward. The beast fell to one side, thrashing but unable to stand. The ropes held firm, pulling it against the trees that now vibrated with its weight. The sound drew others. In the distance, another nocturne bellowed, its echo spreading through the fog like thunder. Liam's heart pounded, but he didn't retreat. He moved closer instead, keeping his steps slow and rhythmic to avoid startling the trapped creature further. The beast struggled, its breathing labored, its body steaming in the cold air, its skull turned toward him, the twin sensory pits glowing faintly red. It emitted a deep clicking tone, scanning him. He stopped just short of the loop's edge and spoke softly, though he knew words meant nothing to it. "You're not my enemy," he murmured. "You're just loud." The creature thrashed once more, but weakened quickly. The ropes weren't cutting into its skin. They were pressing gently, holding without harm. The beast's limbs relaxed. The faint, distorted melody of the fence drifted through the air, and its breathing began to slow in sync with the rhythm. Liam realized that the vibrations of the metal and vines were affecting it, soothing it, perhaps even confusing its sonar sense into calm. Carefully, he pulled out a small scanner from his belt and recorded the pulse of its frequency, the low tremors that rolled through the soil. The data would be proof enough for the instructors, but for him, the real discovery was not technical. It was emotional. This creature wasn't just intelligent, it was capable of curiosity, even restraint. When the larger nocturne approached, the fence roared into song. The overlapping tones clashed violently with the beast's sonar, forcing it to halt just beyond the perimeter. It circled once, twice, and then retreated into the mist, leaving the smaller one behind. Liam waited until the trapped nocturne had stopped struggling entirely. The air was heavy with the scent of sap and rain. He approached slowly, reached out, and placed his hand against the creature's flank. Its skin was rough, warm, vibrating faintly with low pulses that resonated through his fingertips. It reminded him of the rhythmic hum of engines back at the academy, alive, steady, purposeful. When he finally loosened the ropes, the creature didn't flee immediately. It rose slowly, towering over him, its head lowering until its sensory pits aligned with his chest. For a tense moment, he thought it might strike, but instead it exhaled, a slow gust of heated air that brushed against his face, and stepped back. The ropes slipped off its limbs. It turned toward the forest, paused once, and disappeared into the fog without a sound. The cadets watching from the ridge broke into chaotic murmurs. Some shouted his name, others called it madness. Liam didn't look back. He stood where the creature had been, staring at the impressions it left in the mud. His heart still raced, but his mind was calm. The fence behind him sang again, a softer tune now, almost like approval. When he returned to camp, the commander tried to speak, but Liam raised his hand. "It's done," he said simply. "The instructors wanted a live specimen. They have one, alive in its own way." He uploaded the data to the drone beacon, which would transmit it once the next signal window opened. The commander said nothing, his expression unreadable, but the other cadets looked at Liam with a mix of awe and disbelief. He had faced a creature none of them dared to approach, and returned not as a conqueror, but as someone who had learned to coexist. Later that night, as rain began to fall, the wind shifted again. The fence played softly, the sound blending with raindrops tapping on metal. The cadets slept for the first time without fear. Liam sat near the fire, watching the water dance on the leaves, listening to the hum that had become the heartbeat of their survival. He knew the nocturnes were still out there, but they were no longer just predators. They were part of the rhythm of this world, and he had finally learned to move in tune with it. The storm that followed the capture spread across Veltra 5 like a living thing. For 2 days, rain fell in endless waves, soaking the ridge until the soil turned to dark, glassy mud. The sound fences sagged under the weight of water, the vines slipping loose, and the wind that once played their melody now only hissed through broken lines. Most cadets huddled under shelters made from ship tarps, their morale sinking with the storm. The eerie confidence that had grown in the days of calm began to fade. The jungle's faint glow dimmed, smothered by clouds. But Liam Cole never stopped working. He moved through the downpour with slow, deliberate steps, tightening ropes, replacing broken fragments, rebalancing the resonance tubes so they could still hum through the wind. The storm's roar drowned out almost every sound, yet beneath it, he could still sense vibrations in the ground, the deep tremors of the nocturnes moving through the drenched forest. The beasts were restless, confused by the thunder that mimicked their own hunting frequencies. He knew the danger was returning. The balance he had built between sound and silence was fragile, and nature was testing it again. On the third morning, the rain eased. The clouds fractured into streaks of dim light, and the ridge glistened with moisture. Liam stood at the perimeter, watching steam rise from the soaked earth. His hands were raw from working through the storm, his nails black with sap. The cadets slowly emerged from their shelters, blinking into the pale light. For the first time in days, he saw their faces not twisted in fear, but in quiet trust. The Artians began adjusting the upper lines of the fence, while the amphibians cleared fallen branches. Even Commander Krex joined the repairs without speaking. Survival had welded them into something close to unity. That afternoon, a supply drone broke through the clouds, hovering just long enough to drop a metallic capsule that buried itself in the mud. The cadets gathered around as Liam opened it. Inside were rations, a portable transmitter, and a short transmission log from the Academy. The message was simple: trial nearing completion. Survive until final evaluation team arrives. Maintain specimen control. He closed the capsule, his expression unreadable. He knew the instructors expected a report of dominance, perhaps a cage or a kill. Instead, he had something different: proof that fear could be unlearned. That evening, as the sunless sky dimmed again into blue mist, the jungle began to move. The vibrations came slowly at first, like ripples through water, then deepened until the very ground seemed to breathe. The cadets froze, every muscle tightening. The sound fences trembled, singing their metallic chorus, but the melody wavered. The storm had altered its pitch. Liam could tell the frequencies no longer aligned perfectly. He could feel the imbalance. The nocturnes were approaching in greater numbers, drawn by curiosity or hunger. It didn't matter which. The fence was about to be tested one last time. He grabbed a coil of vine and began retying the nearest line, adjusting the spacing between the metal plates. The Arzians tried to help, but he motioned for them to stay back. "It's not the fence that protects us," he said firmly. "It's the pattern. It has to be one voice, not many." He struck the first plate with his knife's hilt, listening to the vibration it released. Then another. Each sound layered over the next until the fence produced a new harmony. Lower, steadier, deeper. The resonance rolled through the fog like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. The approaching tremors slowed. The beasts had heard it. One of the cadets gasped as the first nocturne appeared from the mist. It was massive, larger than the ones before, its body streaked with pale scars that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Its movements were slow, deliberate, not predatory, but investigative. It walked straight to the edge of the fence and stopped, lifting its head to face the sound. Another appeared beside it, smaller, its steps mirroring the first. The creatures emitted low clicks, testing the space, but didn't advance. The fence answered with its trembling song. The air between human and beast was filled with tension so thick that even breathing felt dangerous. Liam stepped forward until he stood within a few meters of the fence. The cadets whispered for him to stop, but he didn't. His boots sank into the wet mud as he raised one hand slowly, not in defiance but in calm acknowledgement. The larger nocturne tilted its head, emitting a deep rumble that vibrated through his chest. He recognized the sound. It wasn't aggression. It was communication. He realized then that the fence had become more than protection. It had become language, a shared rhythm of survival between species. He placed his hand gently against one of the resonant vines and pushed, changing its tone slightly. The nocturne's rumble deepened in response, almost in harmony. The others behind it shifted, restless, but not hostile. The cadets stared in disbelief as the man and the monsters seemed to exchange vibrations like two drummers finding the same beat. The air pulsed with sound, waves colliding and merging until even the jungle joined in. The vines shivered, leaves danced, and droplets of rain fell like falling notes. The moment stretched endlessly, fragile as glass. Then, without warning, the largest nocturne let out a final long pulse, a low, resonant tone that carried through the ridge and vanished into the sky. One by one, the creatures turned away, slipping back into the mist. No attack came. No scream followed. The jungle fell silent again, but it was not the silence of fear. It was peace. When the inspection ship arrived 2 days later, the ridge no longer looked like a battlefield. It looked like a settlement, organized, clean, alive. The sound fences swayed gently in the wind, their tones soft and constant, a living boundary between the cadets and the wild. The Academy officers who stepped off the transport expected exhaustion, casualties, perhaps madness. Instead, they found harmony. The cadets stood together as one group, no longer divided by race or pride. The commander saluted the human first. "You did not just survive," he said quietly. "You changed the test itself." Liam didn't answer immediately. He glanced toward the forest where the faint hum of the nocturne still echoed in the distance. "We didn't tame the world," he said. "We listened to it long enough to belong to it." The officer frowned, perhaps not understanding, but wrote down his statement anyway. The mission was recorded as a complete success. When the ship departed, the cadets watched from the ridge. The last thing they heard before the engines roared was the faint metallic whisper of the fence, an echo of what they had built together. As the transport lifted off, the sound spread across the jungle, drifting among the trees, carried by the wind until it blended with the hum of the creatures that lived beyond sight. The Nocturnes did not attack. They remained still, listening. Liam stood at the edge of the clearing, long after the others had boarded. The soil beneath his boots vibrated faintly with the rhythm he had come to know so well. He closed his eyes and felt the resonance travel through him. It was no longer just sound. It was memory, connection, a reminder that even in the darkest places, understanding could turn fear into peace. When he finally stepped onto the ramp, the storm clouds parted one last time, revealing the faint shimmer of Velthra V's eternal twilight. The jungle sang quietly beneath the departing ship, and for a moment, it sounded almost human. The Academy would later name the ridge Harmony Point, but those who had been there knew it by another name, the place where the human taught the darkness to listen. And as the stars swallowed the ship, the song of the fences continued, a promise etched into the air itself. Survival through understanding, strength through empathy, and peace through the courage to hear what others feared to face.